Most respected Thay, respected, beloved community, today is the 24th of November in the year 2024. We are in the Lower Hamlet, Chùa Cam Lộ, Dharma Nectar Temple, in the Assembly of Stars Meditation Hall. And we are in the 7th or 8th week of our 3-month Rains Retreat. And now together we are going to enjoy 3 sounds of the bell. I have arrived, I am home. Here is the Pure Land. The Pure Land is here. Smiling in mindfulness, I dwell perfectly here. Buddha is the autumn leaf. Dharma is the floating cloud. Can you see the floating cloud in the autumn leaf? Can you see the Buddha in the autumn leaf? The Sangha is found a little bit everywhere. You can put the Pure Land in your pocket and take it with you wherever you go. One time the Buddha asked the monk Subhuti, does a bodhisattva adorn a pure land? And Subhuti said, no, Lord, no world-honored one. When we talk of adorning a pure land, no, adorning a pure land is not adorning a pure land. And that is why it is called adorning a pure land. So that is for you to sort out for yourself. It means the Pure Land can be anywhere, and any one of us can make a pure land in the present moment. with our mindful step and our breathing. Soon it will be Thanksgiving Day. That is controversial in the United States. It's a bit controversial. Some people use that day to mourn the loss of the Native American land. But to be able to feel gratitude all the year round. When we were children, we learnt when we eat a meal to feel grateful to God. If God is bringing us this food, God gives us the beauty of nature. But we can be grateful to Mother Earth who gives us the food. And we don't have to go through God if we don't want to. Say thank you, Mother Earth, through God. But if we like, we can do that also. What did we have to say? I can't remember now. All the beauty of the earth and sky. We thank you to God. But now we can thank the sky, we can thank the earth. And in the United States, we can celebrate to feel our gratitude to our land ancestors who knew how to take care of Mother Earth, who knew how to live in harmony with Mother Earth. And we can ask those ancestors, please teach us how we can do better. Because the wisdom of the Native American culture is very deep and very necessary for our own time. So today, I think I volunteered to talk about or I was asked, I can't remember, to talk about the teachings of conditioned co-arising. This is a very deep teaching, and I don't pretend to be able to comprehend it completely. Maybe I have comprehended a little bit. One time Ananda said to the Buddha, the teachings on conditioned co-arising are very deep, but they are clear as clear can be. And the Buddha said, oh, don't say that, Ananda. Don't say that. It is true they are very deep, but they are very hard to understand. In Buddhism, there are two kinds of sutras. The sutra which is called Liungia, deep teaching sutra, and the sutra which is called not deep teaching sutra. And in order to be able to understand conditioned co-arising, we have to look to the teachings we call the deep teachings of the Buddha. But because conditioned co-arising is such a deep teaching and so difficult to understand, throughout the ages, and even in the time of not long after the Buddha, people tried to make it easy to understand. So they'd lost the teachings, lost the essence that they were meant to convey. Say you are someone who does not have many material things, and you are shown the house of a person who has many material things. And you may think to yourself as you go into the kitchen, oh, it would be nice to have something like this, a nice tabletop to cut my vegetable, or just like this, it would be nice. And then you go out of the house, but you have not had a chance to go into any of the other rooms where there are precious calligraphies and paintings. And sometimes with the teachings of the Buddha, we get in touch with the not so deep teachings, and we don't get a chance to be in touch with the deeper teachings. So in this Rains Retreat, we are looking at the teachings that our teacher Thay gave in 2012, 2013, to try and help us get in touch with the deepest teachings of the Buddha. So you may have heard about the 12 links of conditioned co-arising. If you were here on Wednesday, you already heard a talk, which maybe I hope I can help us go a little bit deeper into that talk. But first I remind us a little bit of some of the things that Thay taught. Is this the right place for the board? Is it too far on the right? Do we need to bring it in at all? Is it okay here? Nó hơi chói. Nó hơi chói. So I'm going to write on the board the traditional way of teaching, which is not the deepest way, and maybe not the way the Buddha wanted us to understand. Dạ đúng rồi. Dạ, được chứ? Được chứ? The problem is the low sun is reflecting. Yeah, if you cannot see on here, I think you can. I think you can tell me what this should be. You all know this. So there are 12, there should be 12. Never mind, don't bother to count. If we've forgotten something, we put it in later. So the way that this is explained both in the East and in the West is that this is we have 3 times, this is the past. This is the present. Stop here at becoming. And this is the future life. Birth and continuing the supper. Yeah. So then we have this is the 3 times. And then we have the different layers of the 2 layers of causes. So ignorance and formations, they cause consciousness. And these things here, consciousness, this is the past life, and this is the present, this is the future. And so the past, it causes the present. And then in the present we also have a layer of, I've spelt consciousness wrongly. We also have a layer of craving, of causing. So these are all down to feeling. These are also, as well as being result, they are also causes. They are causes of our craving, our grasping, and our becoming. And so these are cause, this is a result. These here are result. And they are also the cause of this. Yeah, anyway, that is meant to make it easier. I don't know if it makes it easier or more difficult. But that is trying to explain suffering in samsara. And that is not why the Buddha taught the 12, or he didn't teach, maybe he never taught it like this. He taught maybe different parts of this, and then somebody put them all together to make 12. We can see this, we will see this in a moment. In fact, conditioned co-arising is not something that goes from A to Z in time. It is not a linear progression. It is a number of concentric circles where everything influences everything else, where ignorance influences everything else, and formations influence everything else. Because in Buddhism we do not have a first cause. The Buddha never taught a first cause. And so the danger with this is that we think that Buddhism has a first cause, and that is ignorance. But it's not like that. So we should start thinking in a circle, and put our conditioned co-arising in a circle where everything is connected to everything else. So you have many lines going across the circle. So say you have ignorance here. And you have formations here. And then you have other things like becoming or being. You have birth. You have death. And so you see that each one of these is connected to everyone, each other one. It's more like that. That is the way we see it. So these factors, they are all in each other, and they all condition each other. So the word for conditioned co-arising is pratitya samutpada. And pratitya means conditioned. Sam means co, and utpada means arising. And when we read the Abhidhamma of the Savastivada school, we read the Maha Vibhasha Shastra, we see in chapter 24 that it says the Buddha taught conditioned co-arising on many different occasions to people with different levels of understanding. Sometimes the Buddha taught two we call these nidanas, two conditions, two nidanas, sometimes 3, sometimes 4, sometimes 5, sometimes 6. And now most of the sutras we read, they give us this 12. Maybe there was someone who had a computer that long time ago, and they did change all, and put to all these, every time the Buddha talk about pratitya samutpada, they put to all these 12 in there. When we think about the Buddha teaching 2, we can think about the sentence that we have in many of the sutras. This is because that is. This arises because that arises. This ceases because that ceases. So this is the teaching that that these 12 things are trying to explain. But they don't do it very well. These 12, they don't do it very well. There are deep meaning sutras that do it much better. This is because that is. This arises because that arises. This arises because that arises. This ceases because that ceases. This is to help us there are 2 dimensions to our cognition, to our understanding. Actually, the teaching of this is because that is, conditioned co-arising, is not to explain samsara. The Buddha did not want to make a theory to explain samsara, but it is a theory, it isn't a theory, sorry. It is like epistemology. It is to show how our mind can be in touch with the nature of things. How our mind can know the nature of things. It is to help us answer questions like, who created the universe? Why am I here? On this, why am I here? Yeah. What will I be in the future? What was I in the past? In the future life, in the past life? What will happen when I die? That kind of question that people throughout the ages have always asked. This conditioned co-arising is to help us with that kind of questions. So here we have what we call the historical dimension. I and you, separate. We and them, separate. Where we have being and non-being, birth and death. These are here. But the Buddha said that there is another dimension to reality. We call the ultimate dimension. But we have to go. We live with the reality of I and you, we and them, birth and death. They are part of our life. We cannot throw them away. But what we need to do is to go from that dimension where these things are talked about to another dimension, to remove our fear, to be able to experience deeply things as they are. So what is it that's going to help us? What is it to help us to go downstream? That is this kind of sentence. This is because that is. This sentence does not yet belong to the ultimate dimension, but it will help us go there. And what is it in these 12 things that can help us go here? This, we say the Buddha is the autumn leaf, huh? Because we learn in the sutra that the lifespan of a Buddha has no beginning and no end. So the lifespan of the leaf, it also has no beginning and no end. So there are some very helpful sutras to help us understand conditioned co-arising. And the first one I would like to mention is what is in our chanting book as the Discourse on the Middle Way. And it is in the Chinese and Pali canon. It's called the Katyayana, teachings given to Katyayana. So one day, the monk Katyayana comes to the Buddha and asks, "You have talked about right view. What is right view?" And so the Buddha then gives a teaching. The Buddha says, people in the world rely on being and non-being. They are attached to being and non-being. There is a deep tendency of the mind to attach to being and non-being. Someone who is not attached to and removes the mind's tendency to grasp being, to grasp to being and non-being, no longer clings to myself. We know how important the teaching of no self is for the Buddha. There is no such thing as a separate self. But because we grasp to being and non-being, at the same time, we grasp to a separate self. I am, you are, and I am not you. That is how the being and non-being, they go together with the idea of a separate self. And then the Buddha says, when suffering arises, it arises. When suffering ceases, it ceases. Sometimes in the sutras they talk a very abbreviated way. And sometimes Thay will put in things that help us to understand. It's obvious, suffering arises, it arises. Suffering ceases, it ceases. Well, anybody can agree with that. But there is a deeper meaning to that. And Thay said that when the causes and conditions for suffering are there, suffering arises. When the causes and conditions for suffering are no longer there, suffering ceases. And with all that, there is no need for a self. You can have there can be happiness, there can be suffering, but there doesn't need to be a self who suffers, who ceases to suffer and has happiness. So that is the deep teaching on conditioned co-arising. This conditions that, and in all that we do not need a separate self. And when the noble practitioner sees that suffering arises when it arises, and there's no need for an I who suffers, then that insight, they have no more doubt, and that insight does not come from others. They have to see that for themselves. So the Buddha can tell us that there is no self, but we have to see it for ourselves. We can't say, oh, the Buddha says that, so there's no self. That is clear. And then the next thing that is mentioned in this sutra is that when someone, a practitioner with the right understanding, sees the coming to be of the world, it does not occur to that person that the world does not exist. You see the coming to be of the world. So now we have to understand, what does the Buddha mean by the world? If somebody asks you, how was the world created? You have a very simple answer. This is because that is. When the conditions are right, the world arises. When they are no longer right, the world ceases. But we have not understood properly maybe what the way the Buddha uses the word world. There is another sutra which is very deep. It's called the emptiness of the world. And when we look at these 12 things here, we can see the world. It is here. The six senses and the objects of the six senses. This is about cognition. It's here. And when these things, if you think in a linear way, these things are all in the wrong order. But we don't need to put them in the right order at the moment. How can we have ignorance before we have consciousness? Well, we have to be conscious before we can be ignorant, but never mind. Senses and objects, that is, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, mind. Forms and colors, sounds, smells, tastes, touch, somatosensory, touch, objects of mind, all those 12 things. And when there is the eyes, and the eyes are in touch with forms and colors, there is something called contact, which means consciousness is arising. There is the eye's consciousness, the ear's consciousness, so that when you hear the sound of the bell, you have your otic nerve, your ears, in touch with the vibration from the bell. But there has to be the ear consciousness for you to be able to hear the sound of the bell. Is it time to have sound of the bell? Please enjoy you don't need a separate self. You just need the sound of the bell, your ears and otic nerve, and well, nowadays we would call it the what? The audio cortex or something. Do you have visual cortex? You have audio cortex, something like that. That is all you need. Try. So we are talking about what is the world. That is how the Buddha describes the world. It is the 18 realms of what we call in the Prajnaparamita, we say, have no separate self, the 18 realms of phenomena, thank you. 18 realms of phenomena. That is the 6 sense consciousnesses, 6 senses, and the 6 sense objects arising together. That is what the Buddha means by the world, because outside of that, those things, there cannot be the world. So, the Buddha says, when the world arises, that means that when, we can also call the formations. Another way to look at what is the world is the formations, the skandhas. Form, feeling, perception, mental formations and consciousness. But that is, they all come from these things. So, like when you listen to the sound of the bell, at that moment that is the world. And when it arises, you don't think that, oh, the sound of the bell doesn't exist. If you do, that is because you have a theory, huh? You have a theory. Somebody told me that there is no such thing as sound of the bell. But if you listen, like we did just now, you won't say, oh, the sound of the bell doesn't exist. I don't think, huh? And when the sound of the bell ceases, like now it ceased, huh? You don't say, oh, the sound of the bell exists. That is how we normally use, huh? It's correct, we don't say now it exists. So there are two extremes. One is the extreme of being, of it exists, and the other is non-being, it doesn't exist. And the Buddha teaches the middle way. When the causes and conditions are right, what do you need for the sound of the bell? You need Sister Sangha. You need her arm, you need her breathing, you need many, many things from Sister Sangha. Oh, you need the metal, you need the inviter, you need all these things. And when all these things come together, you can have the sound of the bell. But then when you take the inviter away, the sound of the bell, it ceases. So, the sound of the bell is dependent on different conditions arising together at the same time. And so we say that the sound of the bell inter-is. The sound of the bell inter-is. It doesn't exist on its own. It can only exist in combination with the conditions that it needs. So, dear Sangha, when you hear the sound of the small bell, please stand up. Well, you can massage your feet first. With the next sound of the bell, we stand up. Raise your hand above your head. Interlock your fingers. Bring your hands down on top of your head. Breathing in. No, breathing out. Breathe out, huh? Breathe in. Stand on your toes. Stretch your whole body. And breathe out. Breathe in. And breathe out. Bring your arms down. Bring your hand up. Interlock your finger. Keep your hands up. Breathing in, breathing out. Bend to your left, huh? And breathing in, straighten up. Breathing out, bend to your right. Breathing in, straighten up. Bring your arms down, place on your hips. Bring your two heels together. Breathing in, stand on your toes. Breathing in, make a plie. Yeah, you can make a demi-plie, huh? You don't have to go all the way around down. The main thing is to keep your back straight. Breathing out, I bend my knees. Breathing in, I stand up. Breathing out, bend knee. Right, do you feel better, more awake? Please sit down. So what have we seen? When suffering arises, it arises. It does not need a self to suffer. So what else have we seen? We've seen that when what we call the world, which means the realms of the senses, with the sense consciousness, manifests, then it is because of causes and conditions. The sound of the bell cannot happen on its own, huh? Yeah. And when it ceases, it's also because of causes and conditions. So, and that has led us to see that the sound of the bell inter-is with everything that is not the sound of the bell, or with many things, not everything. And that is what the Buddha would call right view. Right view means avoiding the two extremes of being and non-being, and therefore avoiding the two extremes of birth and death. Because for us, birth means to come into being, and death means to go out of being. But if there is no being and no non-being, you cannot come into it and go out of it. So now we go on to another sutra which has been given to us by so I'm translating into Vietnamese. This is called the Sutra on the Great Emptiness. Emptiness means emptiness of a separate self. The sound of the bell is empty. It's empty of what? Empty of a separate self, but it is full of many other things. It's full of Sister Sangha. It's full of the workers in Taiwan or wherever the bell was made. It's full of the wood that is in the inviter, the trees. Full of everything, but we call it emptiness because it's empty of a separate self. So this sutra on great emptiness is to explain that birth conditions old age and death, and ignorance conditions formations. So it is to explain two parts of these 12 things, the two last part and the two first part. So this, we're very lucky, this sutra, we have it in Pali, in Sanskrit, and in Chinese. So that is quite rare opportunity. We need to have a class to compare these three different versions of this sutra. So now I will take the Chinese version, or the Sanskrit, it's a bit like the Sanskrit. You can ask, who is born? Who grows old? Who dies? That is a question we can ask. To whom do old age and death belong? Those are the two questions that the Buddha asks. And the Buddha instructs his disciples, please meditate on these two questions. The Buddha doesn't give an answer because the answer lies in the middle way. And the middle way you cannot talk about. You can talk about the way to get to the middle way, but you cannot talk about the middle way. So usually we think that there is someone who grows old and dies. You think like that, huh? So I think, oh yeah, I'm growing old, huh? I think many of you think like that. And one day, and maybe not too far away, I will die. Huh? That is our normal way of thinking. To whom do old age and death belong? Well, you say, old age belongs to me. Huh? And if I'm in my coffin, then death belongs to me. Or to you. Or you are the one who grows old and dies, and you are the one in the coffin. So that's how we think. There's someone who grows old and dies, and old age and death belong to that person. So the Buddha said, connected to these ideas, there's someone who is old and dies, are the views that the soul is other than the body, or the soul and the body are the same. So these are common views in India at that time. There are many philosophers asking all the time, is the body and the soul the one thing, or is it two things? So the Buddha never answered that question. And many people ask the Buddha that. Soul and body, one thing or two things? And the Buddha either be quiet or he said he can't answer that. Some people say, why could he not answer? Did he know and he just didn't want to answer? No, it's because these kind of things, they do not belong to the middle way. So then there's no point in answering them. They cannot be answered. So the idea that inside the body or somehow connected to the body there is a soul. And when the body dies, the soul continues. So in that case, the body and the soul are two separate things. But because we can see the body die, but if the body and the soul are the same thing, then when the body dies, the soul also dies. So these are two views. And one of them is called, the first one, where the soul continues after the body dies, is called the view of eternalism. And the second one, where the soul dies with the body, is called the view of annihilation. And these are two extremes, eternalism and annihilation. And the Buddha taught the middle way. There is no soul in Buddhism. So actually the Buddha cannot answer that question. One time Nagasena, who was the teacher of King Milinda in Bactria, King Milinda asked this question, soul and body one thing or two things? And Nagasena said quite rightly, I cannot answer that. And then King Milinda was not happy. He said, you promised me that when I had questions about the practice, about the Dharma, I come to you, you will answer my questions. So then Nagasena said, okay, so I'm going to ask you a question instead. So say, Your Highness, in your palace gardens, are the mangoes sweet or sour? Yeah. Well, we're up in Bactria, huh? You don't have mango trees up in Bactria. So the king said, I can't answer that. And so Nagasena said, well, it's the same with me. I couldn't answer your question about the soul and the body. And he said, I can't answer that because we don't have any mango trees. And Nagasena said, it's the same. I can't answer your question because there's no such thing as a soul. Yeah. And the Buddha said, that is right view. And that is what is meant by birth, conditions, old age, and death. So birth, conditions, old age, and death doesn't mean to say that once you've been born you have to die. Well, it means much more than that. It means that the idea of birth and death inter-are. As long as you have the idea of being born, you will have the idea of dying. When you can remove the idea of being born, at the same time you remove the idea of dying. That is what is meant, that is the deeper meaning. So, because the idea of being born and dying is connected to the idea of being and non-being. So, this is when you are born. Someone is born here. We call it B. And this person dies here. We call it D. And this part here, it can go on forever and ever, we call non-being. And this part we call being. I exist. He exists, she exists. Then he dies. So I say to myself, he doesn't exist anymore. So we have to call that non-being. So these two ideas are connected to the idea of being and non-being. And that is why the Buddha taught this becoming, it also can be translated as being. That is why the Buddha taught that being leads to birth and death. Ideas of being and non-being lead to ideas of birth and death. So don't say when someone you love dies, don't say they don't exist anymore, because you will suffer a lot. You have to find ways. Or maybe it will happen, it's best if it happens quite naturally, that you are in touch with that person. Yeah. But we need the word death, we need the word birth in order to make death certificates and birth certificates. We have to talk about these things. I've come to see Mr. X. Oh, Mr. X has died. You cannot see him. Well, that's true. But if Mr. X is your loved one, you find ways to wave goodbye, but keep meeting again and again. Meeting again on the wonderful path of life. If you are not obstructed by the idea of being and non-being, you will be able to meet that person. But the ideas of being and non-being, they obstruct us, so we cannot meet that person. And I think it's very obvious to us all that the moment when our birth certificate says we were born, we were there before that, I think. Yeah. And so the same should go with the death. When your death certificate say you die, you are there. So the other question that we ask is about the word formations. When people, at the beginning of this talk, we said that ignorance and formations belong to past life. Yeah. And it's very difficult. How can formations of past life make a consciousness in this life? Doesn't make much sense. So they have to change the meaning of formations. And they say what formations really means is karma. That is actions. Actions of past life, they determine if you were a bad person in your past life, you have a you, a soul, then you will have a difficult time in this life. Or if you are a good person, you may go to heaven or have a good time in this life. Yeah. So they changed formations into meaning actions, but formations, although in Chinese the word for action, formation is the same, it's in Sanskrit or the Buddha's language, they're not the same thing. Yeah, this is a formation. Sister Sangim is a formation. A formation is something that is made up of many things that are not itself, something that is conditioned. That is the meaning of formation. And because of ignorance, we have misunderstood formations. We have misunderstood our body, our feelings, our perceptions. They are all formations. But with right view, we understand what a formation is. That a formation is made up of everything that it is not itself. That I am made up of everything that is not myself. I am made up of my father, my mother, my grandparents, countless generations of ancestors. I am also made up of my descendants. And when I see that, then I do not feel that I die, that I come from nothing and I will go back to nothing. So to understand, to have right view of the formations is also the way to understand no being, no non-being, no birth, no old age, and no death. The Buddha said that ask yourself the question, who is the formations? To whom the formations here you can understand as the 5 skandhas. Who is the 5 skandhas? Who is the feelings? Who is the perceptions? Who is the mental formations? And ask yourself, to whom does this body belong? To whom do these feelings belong? And you contemplate those questions. And when you have the insight, the right view, then you will see that the formations are at rest. And your ideas of birth, old age, and death cease. So to sum up for today, I will return to the 12 links. Please don't forget, this is very important, that everything conditions everything else in our series, because I have to remove it. So now we look, what can we salvage from this in order to be able to help us touch the ultimate dimension of no birth, no death, no being, no non-being. Because in most of the sutras, the deep sutras, the Buddha talks about right view. We can say here that ignorance is equivalent to wrong view, not understanding the way things are. And we need to bring consciousness up. As we saw before, ignorance, they need to need to have consciousness. We cannot. And so we put a wrong consciousness. Or, if you like better, wrong view. So we don't need a consciousness here anymore. And because formations have ignorance in them, we have not understood the true nature of formations. That is what formations means here. Formations, when you think the sound of the bell is coming from itself, you don't see it coming from your audio cortex. You don't see it as coming from the people who made the bell in Taiwan. So that is the way normally our mind grasps to formations as separate self-entities. So here we put formations as separate selves. Okay, what else do we need? So we can keep this, huh? So these things because in formations we already have, like we saw, our 5 skandhas. That means our body and our mind. We already have the senses. So we don't need to put them here. They're all there already. Feeling, craving, they are mental formations. But this one is a little bit important. Grasping to something. Because we have seen up here that we grasp to formations as separate selves. We grasp to ourself as a separate self. So grasping, we need maybe to keep it, because in the sutra we just listened to, the Buddha said that because the mind grasps to being and non-being. So we can keep the grasping. We can put it here. Grasping, upadana, grasping to something as a separate self. It's really come from our ignorance. But what makes the formations separate selves is our grasping. What else do we grasp to? When we grasp to formations, we grasp to being. They really exist, but at the same time we have to say non-being, being and non-being. Because as long as we grasp to being, we have to have non-being. Huh? You can't have being without non-being. Huh? And birth and death. Because of being and non-being, we have ideas of birth and death. This is old age, is decay. If you look at the leaf, you could, I don't know if you want to call it dead, or you want to call it old age. When does the leaf die? That is the question, huh? So when we are old, we are decaying, huh? And so when we're decaying, it's a kind of death, huh? The cells are dying and so on. So decay and death, they're not really two separate things, and stages of decaying and decaying. Until you can no longer be called a leaf, you will be called the earth or something. All the moisture that comes from you. So maybe we don't need decay, huh? That's part of death. So this kind of condition co-arising, it is simple. It can help us develop our understanding of interbeing, so that we can have another condition co-arising. So wrong consciousness, here we can have right view, which is the transformation of ignorance. Then we have formations. Inter-are. Formations as interbeing. And then we don't need to grasp anymore. The tendency of our mind to grasp is transformed. So we have no being, no non-being, the middle way. No birth, no death. So normally when we talk about the 12 nidanas, they say, but with the ending of ignorance, formations cease, grasping ceases, everything ceases, being ceases. So you have that is the normal way of putting it, but it can lead to misunderstandings. It can lead to the idea that when you have right view, you don't exist anymore. You're not part of birth and death anymore. The reason why is because you have transformed your grasping to ideas of birth and death and being and non-being. But it doesn't mean to say that you don't die, that you are not, you don't continue. The teaching body very kindly allowed me to have another session. I don't know if you could, but I think it will help a little bit to understand a little bit more. Yeah. And we really must end here for today.